most of the time, Thanksgiving is one of those holidays where families get together. It's a lot of laughter, reconnecting, drinking, playing games, and maybe even some karaoke. There may be a little bit of quarrels here and there, but no one ever expects for it to get super sinister and gory, especially for one family who was celebrating in 2009 in Florida. And I don't know what was in the water in 2009 around Thanksgiving time, but a lot of these cases are definitely from around that time. I was noticing a very weird pattern, similar pattern with that. I'm like, wait, this is weird. I believe like our last two stories were also in the year of 2009. But while everyone had been enjoying their dinner and, enjoying time with their family, this family had been sadly grieving. Paul Michael Marriage was a 35-year-old young man with a troubling and confusing past. Though he had some arising issues, and you will see as this video progresses, no one could have imagined what would have went down that fateful day. Now, when I had first came across this case, I was trying to look for like any personal information on him or the victims, like birthdays or anything like that, but most of these videos and like articles just jump right into what happened, and they do cover a little bit of background story on Paul, but nothing really personal or personalized for the victims, nothing that talks about them or explains who they were as a person outside of this case. Now, for Paul, much of his childhood, he wasn't a troubled child. Like, there was no issues that he caused or no actions that he did that, raised any eyebrows. But something in his past or his young, leading up to his young adult years must have triggered him. There was some sort of stressor in Paul's life to cause this drastic change. Before all of this, Paul seemed to be very close with his family, writing nice things about his sister in his yearbook, and even making this quote when he graduated from high school at the age of 17, stating, "I love you now and forever," which was a letter to all 32 members of his family. And looking back and actually reading that, it is very, very eerie, especially to know what happened some 17 years later. But after graduating from high school, Paul wasted no time going ahead and applying to college, where he attended University of Miami. And while Paul had been attending this university, he was going through a lot of mental problems. Now, I don't know if it was the trigger or stressor that he had experienced allegedly, or if it was the stress of school, which can definitely be stressful. As a college student, I definitely resonate. It's hard, especially trying to maintain life and schoolwork, especially if you're not on the campus. And so at 19 years old, Paul did suffer from a nervous breakdown, and his mother had even spoke on some of the other issues that he had been battling with, which was like severe depression, I believe, and then OCD, which comes up a lot in most of these articles. Now, all the while Paul was going through this, he also maintained being an honor student, but it's unclear what events had occurred during his breakdown and what caused them to, go ahead and send him to get evaluated and find out that he was diagnosed with these things. We don't know that because respectfully the family did decline to go ahead into details with that, but from multiple accounts from Paul's family, he changed after that fateful day. After this, Paul just began blatantly acting out. Now, from some accounts, some was saying that he was indulgent in a lot of bad habits, like insomnia, like he was not trying to go to sleep, or he had trouble sleeping, unhealthy eating habits, and like I mentioned earlier, his OCD was getting worse. Not to mention, he was reportedly like constantly shaving and like bathing, like constantly all the time. And I guess it's not like really a bad thing depending on who's looking at it, but because he was diagnosed with OCD, it is very, very important to know. But people truly felt like he was unable to make decisions for himself, and he was especially unable to hold a job. To them, it was like living with and having to get to know a completely different person. And this honestly truly worried his family, rightfully so. Paul had been skipping out on his medication, and of course, we know what happens when the body is dependent on the medication and then you just stop. People can definitely, and it's been reported that people definitely go through these psychotic episodes, and I'm guessing during these psychotic episodes he would sit there and constantly just blatantly threaten his sister. I'm not talking regular fighting, he's threatening to kill his sisters. And to me, in my opinion, I honestly just feel like at that point someone should have intervened. Paul had reportedly even tried to off himself as well. This family did have one prior history of a troubled past with some very, very disturbing details. In the year of 1973, his aunt Saula, she had actually went ahead and took the lives of her ex-husband and 2 children before going ahead and committing suicide. It is most definitely unclear why this happened, and I could not find an article, nor could I find any updates on that. But in 2006, his sister had actually filed a report on him, but she had quickly withdrawn on that report. So obviously they were trying to extend grace to Paul a lot of times. But growing up, Paul was the complete opposite of who he had been becoming. He played all types of sports: football, soccer, baseball. He led certain groups in his high school. People described him as someone who was handsome and fit, very driven, and who displayed his maturity. And he had even graduated 3rd of his class. So what happened to Paul? So in the year of 1994, Paul was actually declared legally disabled, and he had to solely depend on his mother and his father. Now, of course, in the beginning, it was not all bad. There was some, little issues here and there, but nothing too wicked or crazy. And then, as I stated before, something changed, something happened, and Paul just became this different person. Like I stated before, he was threatening his sisters, telling them he was going to kill them. He was threatening his parents with guns, the whole 9. And I am pretty sure that his mental illness did play a huge part, but like I stated before, this is where they should have intervened. And so he was admitted to the psych ward a few times, actually I believe 3 or 4 times. Do not quote me on that, but for the next 12 years this is what they had to deal with. And I just feel like that day, all that anger that they had was probably pent up. They probably got into that little argument, and of course with his severe mental issues, they might have gotten over it, but Paul probably had that lingering in his head, and then boom. And so, not making excuses, but mental health issues is very, very, very severe. And I do think I want to go ahead and do a little mini series on cases just with these mental severe issues. But Paul's parents did go ahead and deal with this all the way up until 2016, when they were basically completely fed up. And so they went ahead, they got him this condo fully paid for, and they hired him a live-in caregiver. So they got Paul ass up out of there. And at this time, he was basically just isolated from his family. So it is 2008, and the marriages, they have these family friends, and one of them is hosting a Thanksgiving dinner, and they invite the Mirages, and they're like, if Paul is coming, you can just go ahead and decline that offer because we don't want him here. And so a lot of people, family and family friends, did not want Paul around because of the way he had been acting prior. So that made people shun Paul basically, and I guess you could just refer to him as the black sheep of the family. As I stated earlier, Paul was estranged from his family, and so on that Thanksgiving day when he called, no one was expecting him to call, much less show up. The Suttons had been hosting their annual Thanksgiving dinner party, and they went ahead and invited the marriages. This family dinner consisted of 17 people, which included family and friends. It was not until 5:30 that afternoon that Paul decided to make his appearance. When this happened, he did proceed to call his father out of the blue, and his father, of course, missing him and not speaking to him in such a long time, went ahead and answered the phone. He decided to give Paul directions to where they was at so he can come and, link up with them. And I found it really strange because that was not their residence. Like, they were guests at someone else's hosting. And so if everyone is already standoffish with Paul and, he's being shunned and whatnot, and everyone knew of, what he was about, why did the dad feel so comfortable? And this is not me shifting blame because he had nothing to do with what Paul did, but why did he feel so comfortable to just go on and invite Paul, especially without consulting with the head of household? But in all honesty, I do feel like Mr. Murhage just wanted to reconnect with his son, and he wanted to use the holidays as an opportunity. And of course, we know that the dad had no clue as to what Paul was coming over to do. But Paul does show up at 5:30, and he only stays for about 5 hours, so he did leave around 10:30. And when he arrived in the beginning, everything was going well. The people that were in attendance said that they were shocked because that was now out of the norm for Paul. But of course, the joy did not last long, and an argument brewed. Soon after, things seemed to calm down and the family seemed to be back to normal, except for Paul. Though on the outside he seemed like he was okay, on the inside he was seeing red. Paul's little 6-year-old cousin decides that she wanted to go ahead and put on a performance for the family. She had an upcoming, I believe it had been like an assembly for the school, and so she just wanted to go ahead and show off her dance moves. And his cousin Carla, she had been playing the piano and just singing Christmas jingles with her family. And Michael goes ahead and he excuses himself from the family and he leaves out the front door. So he left out and he was there for a little while, and I assume the family just thought that he was going to get some air. But when Paul came back, he stormed back into the party holding a handgun, and without a word or any notice, he shot fire into the crowd. Paul first went ahead and shot his 79-year-old aunt, then turned the gun towards his sisters and fatally wounded them. And one of his sisters, Lisa, her husband, Patrick, had actually been in attendance, and when his wife was shot, he went to go and just basically make sure she was okay. So he ran to her side, and while he was doing that, Paul went ahead and shot Patrick. His sister at the time, Lisa, had actually been pregnant, which it just frustrates me because, for one, the fact that he had no remorse in killing his family, but for two, his sister being pregnant, carrying a life, possibly his niece or nephew, like an unborn child. Like, this man is sick. And so Paul did get shot. He was injured, and he actually spent 3 months in a coma. And I know waking up from that coma and having to learn, and deal with that grief of losing your wife and your unborn child is just a lot to bear. And so before this incident had even occurred, the family was just chilling, and Michaela had been trying to tell everyone good night because it was time for her to go to bed, and she goes off to bed. So she had been tucked away, sleeping as a child should be. And when Paul began to start shooting, everyone had actually ran to take cover. They was hiding, trying to call the police, and everyone obviously in the moment forgot about 6-year-old Michaela. And so Paul walks down the hall and he walks into Michaela's room where she is peacefully sleeping, and he shoots 3 times at her, and on impact, she dies. Mind you, this little girl was turning 7 a few days later. So Paul leaves out of the room and he comes back into the area where all the guests was, and he tells them, I've been waiting 20 years to do this. Honestly, to hold on to and harbor that much anger and wild thoughts, like he stayed for 5 hours. Though he stayed for 5 hours, the attack did last just for a short period of time. And so my thoughts is like, was you sitting there thinking about that the whole time? Was that his intention in the first place, to come and kill them? Immediately after this, Paul fled the scene and he got missing. And so there was like this huge manhunt held for him, obviously a search across South Florida. And this case was not only huge because of what Paul did and when he did it, but because the youngest victim, which happened to be Michaela, the 6-year-old, she was the daughter of a very famous news anchor for the WPTV Channel 5 news station. His name was Jim Sutton. He was very well known in the media and very, very wealthy man. And so there was a lot of resources put into this case, a lot of hands on deck to go ahead and find Paul so they can go ahead and bring him to justice. So a $25,000 reward was put on his, well, not put on his head, it was put out to find him. Yeah, I know what I mean. But in today's time, that's equivalent to like over $35,000. And so they had been offering this to just about anybody who had any information on his whereabouts. This reward soon after increased to $100,000. Now, it had actually got really real because the American Most Wanted even aired him as a case. They plastered this man's picture everywhere so people can find him. Paul, he had been hiding in a hotel for about a month. And the way they found him was like really, really hilarious to me because he attempted to disguise himself and he didn't like do no major surgery change or makeup change or anything like that. He just shaved his head. So like everybody still knew it was Paul, just Paul with a bald head. And he of course checked into the hotel under an alias name. And according to the hotel owner, he had been there for about a month. And this had been before the hotel owner started to get a little suspicious. When the police caught up with Paul, he acted dumbfounded. Like he literally told the police, I didn't know what I was doing. And so regularly the police go ahead and conduct their interview, and it was said that during this interview Paul seemed very dazed, like spaced out. I don't know if he was under the influence, if this was his mental illness. I have no clue what it was, but that's just what the state they reported him in. Now, of course, we briefly touched on his mental illness report, but a lot of people feel like this particular incident was premeditated on Paul's part. In the weeks leading up to this attack, Paul had actually went to the bank and withdrew $12,000, and he went and bought a bunch of different guns, including the handgun that he used to take out those vicious attacks. And let's not forget, this man brought an entire loaded handgun to a family event. Like, why would you need a loaded handgun brought to a family event? I can understand things going on afterwards, but with his history, I just feel like he shouldn't have been able to even purchase a weapon. This man had previously waved guns at his family multiple times. He has threatened to kill his siblings. Like, Florida needs to do a way better job. No one would truly know why Paul went ahead and committed this vicious attack. This was a man who, when he was younger, once dedicated his entire Facebook to loving his family and wanting to make them proud. And I do feel like a lot of the times when we see cases and just in general, we cannot go ahead and just base someone's actual personality and who they are based off of their social media profile or presence. And so when people had learned about this attack, they was caught off guard. And it's like, instead of celebrating Thanksgiving and the upcoming holidays, Michaela's birthday, they had to plan funerals and grieve. A lot of the people who previously felt like they knew him felt like this was completely out of character from the person that they knew before. But like it had been stated before, his condition had gotten way worse. And so Paul was not that same 17-year-old boy who made those Facebook posts. And for those people who felt like this was completely out of character for Paul, they obviously did not know how much his condition had escalated. When asked about his daughter, Jim, of course, was distraught about losing her. He made several news posts dedicated to her, as well as the people that he worked with in the office. They stated that she was always in the studio and that she was like family to them, basically. But Mr. Sutton stated that he knew that she was in heaven and that God packed a lot of sweetness in that little body. And it's like, I honestly cannot imagine how her father felt like then and even till this day, losing his 6-year-old baby girl. And so Paul was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, and they was trying to lay the death penalty on the table, and they wanted for him to basically suffer and go out the same way he took those 4 lives. His family, his parents, and the family of the victims had been waiting for a while just for him to go ahead and get his trial, and they get their justice and they can just move on with it. But that never happened. Just a couple of weeks before they were supposed to have said trial, Paul had went ahead and pleaded guilty. He had accepted a plea deal, and this deal was for them to go ahead and take the death penalty off the table, and he would stay in prison forever without the chance of parole. Of course, his family and the Suttons as well, so wanted for this to go to trial, but it just did not happen because of the plea deal. And Patrick was kind of relieved that the trial did not happen because he did not want to relive that horrible night, understandably. And in September of 2011, the Suttons which is Michaela's mother and father, they had actually went ahead and tried to sue Paul's parents. They felt as if Paul's father had been at fault, and this could have definitely been prevented if he did not allow for Paul to come to the Suttons' residence, which two things can definitely be true at one time, and the father not to put any burden on him, but it was definitely, I'd say, a weird thing for him to not even notify the family and give them that choice to say yeah or no. But 3 years after trying to do this in 2014, the court had actually denied it and said Paul's family could not be at fault for what he did. And it's like no one will truly know what happened that night or why Paul did what he did, what was his stressor. But it is very frustrating and very unfortunate because 2 families were ruined that night. 4 people lost their lives, and all for literally no reason, no motive at all. But you guys, that was definitely it for this video. I hope you guys are enjoying all the content that is being pushed out for you guys, and if you guys have any videos or any cases that you recommend I cover, definitely let me know. I'm on any of my social media platforms or my business email. All of that will be in the first comment or the description box below for your access. Do not forget to like, share, subscribe, and if you guys do decide to comment, please have healthy, positive dialogues, because you just never know who is watching these cases from the family, and it costs nothing to just be positive and be kind. But thank you so very much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Yeah, Paul. Dad, hi. Just praying to God that you and Mom would take my call. Mom would take it. I know. I wish she would. I love you so much. All I do is I think about you both all the time, at least in our lives. We're totally wounded. I know you are. It's because of me. I have nothing. You have nothing. It's a total nightmare. It's an emptiness. Life has changed forever, whatever it is.